The Tender Bar, which is based off the memoir by J.R. Moringer, directed by George Clooney, and written by William Monahan, who's famously known for writing the screenplay for The Departed. Stars Ben Affleck, Ty Sheridan, Lily Ray, and of course the great Christopher Lloyd. I'm a fan of like feel-good type movies. They're not always my favorite, but I'm always curious to find new iterations of this genre. And when I think of feel-good movies, the first one I think of is the movie Chef, which came out back in 2014, written and directed by Jon Favreau. Also stars Jon Favreau as Chef Carl Casper. So I was curious if it was going to be anything like that movie. I didn't know a ton about it. I knew it was based off a memoir, and the buzz around it was that it had one of Ben Affleck's best performances that he's ever done in his career. So sat down and watched the movie, and I can honestly say it's not a terrible movie, but I wouldn't call it great by any stretch. It's based off a boy who grew up on Long Island. His dad abandoned he and his mom. His dad's a famous radio DJ in New York. So this recurring theme is whenever his mom's not around or his family's not around, he's listening to the radio to find the voice, like his dad is referred to as the voice throughout the movie. And it's really kind of a coming-of-age story about him trying to find this father figure that he's lacked throughout his young life. And there are two different versions of JR, the character that this movie is based off of. There's the child version, played by Daniel Ranieri. Hopefully I'm getting his name right. And Ty Sheridan, who plays the college-age version of JR. I liked the child version much more because I really liked seeing him interact with his family, and he could tell from an early age that he was different. He and his mom go to live with his grandpa, and he's always got friends and family coming in and out of the house. Like the house is always packed whenever you see it. So you almost get this like claustrophobic type feel, or at least, when I was a kid, I didn't like being around large amounts of people. So I kind of felt his pain a little bit whenever I was seeing those moments happen. But the peak of this movie is JR's interaction with his Uncle Charlie, played by Ben Affleck. And I do agree with what the critics and most everyone who's watched this movie has been saying. Ben Affleck drives this movie because you really felt like he cared about this kid. And he reminded me of that uncle that most every family has, that has his flaws, but he has good intentions and teaches good life lessons. And sometimes they might be through unconventional means, but you still feel that, and you could feel the care that Uncle Charlie had for JR, because he really becomes JR's father figure. And he talks down about JR's dad, and they even have a couple of interactions when JR's dad does show up periodically throughout the movie. But you can tell that the father is just this constant source of disappointment. It's almost like he kind of tries to be in JR's life, but then just leaves him. Like there's a scene in the movie when his dad comes to pick JR up, and literally they talk in the car while he drives around the block and then drops him off. And you're like, what is that? What kind of father figure is that? So it really makes you root for Uncle Charlie even more. And Uncle Charlie works at this bar called the Dickens. And I wish that we would have spent more time at the bar, because it reminded me of the old sitcom Cheers, which also happens to be my favorite show of all time. You saw these different characters come through the bar and watch them interact with JR, both the young and the adult versions. And you feel like JR really got a lot of his life imprinted through what he learned at the bar and watching the characters interact with each other. And, he read so many books while he was there, because you could see in the back wall of the bar, it was covered with books. So Charlie would give him a book and be like, yeah, you can read whatever kind of book you want. Because he told JR as a kid, you're not really good at sports, so I hope you don't want to try and do that as a career, so you got to figure out what you want to do. So he decided he wanted to be a writer. So he goes off to college, gets a job at the New York Times, and I don't really want to get into too many other spoilers for that because I think the movie is worth watching, even though I said it's not great, but I'll get into that a little bit later on. But I really felt for JR as he got older, specifically because of this relationship he had with a girl named Sydney. And I kind of got what they were trying to make her represent, because she was this woman that he had a fling with, but they never dated because she was always with someone else. And at the end of the movie, she ends up getting married, and he's obsessing over this girl, trying to do whatever he can to impress her, to try and make himself seem like a winner in her eyes so he can win her over. And I felt his pain because, I know what that's like, that I want to do everything I can to impress this girl that I like and then not have those feelings reciprocated, and then watching them move on and seemingly be happier with their life, and the fact that you're not in it really is a heartbreaker. So that's where I really felt the coming of age aspect of this movie. And I liked it for that sense, but the whole movie felt very safe. Like there weren't any real stakes and no real threat of anything bad happening. And it's kind of where adapting memoirs and adapting, life stories can be dangerous at times, because it doesn't make for very compelling viewing. The most compelling version to me was the kid version, because you saw what was going on with the mom. You saw him trying to struggle with, well, what am I going to do? And he's having to worry about things that kids shouldn't be worried about. He shouldn't be worried about whether or not his mom's going to have a job. He should be worrying about playing outside or doing kid stuff. So it's not a terrible movie. If I were to give it a number score, I'd probably give it a 6. If you're a Ben Affleck fan, it's definitely worth a watch. And I would still watch it if you're not a diehard Ben Affleck fan. If you're a fan of good performances, then I would definitely check this out. And I'll close with this. The type of movie this is reminds me of a movie that I saw years ago called Lakeview Terrace, starring Samuel L. Jackson. Plot completely different, but they were the same in the sense that the movies weren't great, but the individual performances by the lead actor is enough to get you to watch. For those who may not know what Lakeview Terrace is about, it's about this interracial couple who moves into the suburban neighborhood, and Samuel L. Jackson is their next door neighbor. And he's not a fan of interracial couples. So it was an interesting twist with him being a black man having those feelings. And the movie itself isn't really that great. I didn't think the story was executed that well, but his performance was great in that movie, and enough that made me say it's worth viewing. So I would watch it based on Ben Affleck's performance alone, because it'll really make you feel some of that family drama and remind you of family members that you had or that you knew someone else had growing up. Other than that, it's just an okay movie.